So, there are usually two ways of describing games. One is the so-called normal form or strategic form, and the other is known as the extensive form. I shall again show you both forms using a particular example. The most standard or the most famous game in game theory is the prisoner's dilemma. Now, let us think about a situation like this. So, Anuj and Jinesh are two small time criminals, and the police have caught them, but they do not know or they do not have sufficient evidence. So, they have to try and get them to confess. So, let us suppose Anuj and Jinesh are taken to different rooms and they are given these options, that they have only two options, either to confess or to deny, and they are told that if they both confess, then they will get 4 years in jail each. That is why you have -4 and -4 in that particular cell. I will talk a little more about it later. Similarly, if Jinesh confesses and Anuj denies, then Jinesh is going to get away scot-free, 0 years in jail, whereas Anuj is going to get 6 years in jail. Similarly, the other way around, if Jinesh denies and Anuj confesses, then Anuj is going to get 0 years in jail, whereas Jinesh will have to put up with 6 years of jail. And finally, if none of them confess, they both deny, then they will get away with just 2 years in jail each, because there is not sufficient evidence to convict them. So, let me, without trying to solve this particular game, tell you a little bit about how the game has been written and how we can talk about the normal form in this particular context. The normal form tells you, first of all, who the players in the game are, Jinesh and Anuj. What actions do they have? Well, confess and deny. These are the two actions that Anuj and Jinesh have. Now, the payoffs are written as a cell in the particular cell. So, now you know about the players, the actions that they have, and the payoffs, which are just simply different years, number of years in jail, depending upon the actions undertaken by Anuj and Jinesh. Now, what we will need to find out, or what we want to know, is what will happen in this particular game. But before I do that, let me write down the same game in the extensive form, and there I shall show you how the extensive form is different from the normal form. So, here is the extensive form. Now, the extensive form is written in the form of a game tree. It is a very strange form of tree. It starts from the top and grows downwards. Now, Anuj has two choices, to confess or to deny. And then we have put Jinesh further down, and Jinesh also has two choices, either to confess or to deny. Now, we have drawn this dotted line between the two nodes where Jinesh has to take an action. This is to indicate that Jinesh does not know what Anuj has done when he has to take a decision. After that, Jinesh again has the same choices to either confess or to deny, depending upon whatever Anuj has done. So, what the extensive form does is it also shows how each player moves. In this case, of course, there is nothing much to show, but nevertheless, it is quite interesting, because this is a kind of a game which is known as a simultaneous move game. Now, simultaneous move does not mean that the two players move simultaneously. All that it means is that when one player makes a decision, he or she is unaware of the decisions or the strategies of the other players. So, in this particular case, both Anuj and Jinesh don't know what the other has chosen, either to confess or to deny, when they take their particular actions. So, each point where one of the players has to take a decision is called a decision node. And as you can see, at some point the game ends and the payoffs are decided. So, for instance, if Anuj confesses and you are on the leftmost branch of the tree and then Jinesh also confesses, then the payoffs are -4 and -4, and that is the terminal node. That is where the game ends. Let us go back to the game in the normal or the strategic form, and we can now try and solve this game. So, what should Anuj and Jinesh do? We can simply look at it from the point of view of Jinesh first. So, suppose Anuj confesses. What should Jinesh do? Well, the payoffs are given as -4 and -6 between the choices he has to confess or to deny. So, if Anuj confesses and if Jinesh also confesses, then Jinesh would get -4. If Jinesh continues to deny, he will get -6. And obviously, -4 is better than -6, so Jinesh will confess. So, in other words, we know now that if Anuj confesses, Jinesh should confess. What should Jinesh do if Anuj decides to deny? Here the payoffs are 0 and -2 for Jinesh. If he confesses, then he gets 0, and if he denies, then he gets -2. Again, getting 0, getting no years in jail, is better than getting 2 years in jail. So, in which case it would be better for him to confess. So, what we can see is, first of all, no matter what Anuj does, whether he confesses or denies, Jinesh, the best thing for Jinesh to do is to confess. And we can therefore say confessing is a dominant strategy. Confessing is always better than denying. In the same breath, we can also call deny a dominated strategy, since the payoff from denying is always less than that of confessing. Now, if you go a little beyond, we can see that whatever is true for Jinesh is true for Anuj as well. If Jinesh confesses, Anuj should confess. If Jinesh denies, Anuj should still confess. So, consequently, the outcome for this game, and which we call an equilibrium outcome, will be for both Jinesh and Anuj to confess. So, what we have shown is that both Jinesh and Anuj have a dominant strategy, and that strategy is to confess. Confessing is better than denying at all times. So, therefore, even though they have two actions, the strategies turn out to be to use just one of them. Secondly, what you should notice that an equilibrium is always defined in terms of strategies. Here the strategies of the two players Anuj and Jinesh is to confess. The outcome is 4 years in jail each. So, there is a difference between the equilibrium strategy and the equilibrium outcome. At any rate, you would, I think, agree that if you have a dominant strategy, a strategy which is good or the best under all circumstances, then it would be best, or it would be certainly be good to play that dominant strategy. It seems to make sense. And so, in this particular game, confessing is a dominant strategy and both players end up confessing, and so they spend 4 years in jail each. Now, you might wonder how come they don't land at the good outcome, which is only 2 years in jail each. But that is the result of the way that this game has been structured. and we shall talk about that particular issue a little later. You can reach the same conclusion by the extensive form as well. Suppose Anuj confesses. What should Jinesh do? Well, you can see that his payoff of -4 is better than the payoff from -6, and therefore he should confess. What should Jinesh do if Anuj denies? Then you can see his payoff of 0 is better than his payoff of -2, so again he should confess. So consequently, Jinesh should always confess, and similarly Anuj should also confess, and the end result would be that they would get 4 years in jail each.